All right, everybody, if you could take your seats, we'll go ahead and get started. First, very important announcement, lost and found. If you're like me, you don't go anywhere without your reading glasses. Somebody found these on the floor. So if they're yours, I'll throw them down here, and they'll be in the front row. Thank you. So we're very happy to welcome Vice Admiral Thomas Moore, Commander NAVC, and his great team of PEOs up here this morning. Our panel is on shipbuilding and this afternoon on ship maintenance. Admiral Moore took the helm last June, so as I said earlier today, this is his first appearance with SNA as NAVC. And we're all very familiar with NAVC, having interacted with them with a professional workforce, over 70,000 strong, many times throughout our careers as ship drivers. Admiral Moore, 81 Naval Academy grad, advanced degrees from George Washington University and MIT, surface nuke with tours aboard the South Carolina, Virginia, and Enterprise, transitioned to the ED community in '94, and lots of great work there, including 5 years as PMS 312, where he was responsible for new construction of the George H.W. Bush and overhauls of the Ike and Carl Vinson. Served as OPNAV 43 Deputy Director and then as the Director, and went over to command the PEO for aircraft carriers, where he, big challenges, responsible for delivering the Ford class, and led the first ever inactivation of a nuclear carrier for the fabled Enterprise. He will lead a panel, as I said, of several NAVC PEOs. He will introduce them to you, and we've heard a lot throughout the week about current and future force structure, and I'm sure that we'll be very interested to hear what the panel has to say. A reminder ahead of time, the 2 luncheons going on, over here the CEO luncheon, over here the awards banquet. We're going to cut this panel just a couple minutes short to make sure you all have enough time to make a head call and then get to the luncheons later on this morning. So Admiral Moore, over to you. Thanks for coming today.
Okay, thanks so much, and it's great to be back at SNA and finally actually to be as a moderator instead of one of the people to my left. It's great to be here this morning. What we're going to do here this morning, I'm going to provide a couple opening remarks here. I'll keep mine short. And then I've got the Coast Guard and the Program Executive Officers of the Navy to kind of talk about some of their programs. But rather than just kind of give you a program review, we wanted to kind of talk about this in the context of a lot of the things that you've already been talking about here over the last couple of days. So obviously, first and foremost in everybody's mind, I think on the acquisition side of the house is the recent force structure assessment and what does that mean to us. So we want to talk about that. The other thing is, I would call this, we're going to deliver the Ford here in April. We've been delivered several new classes of ships here recently, where they have all been with their own challenges. I think we're working our way through that, and I think the PEOs will address those. But I think we're in what I like to call the age of the electric ship. Between DDG 1000 and Ford class and where we're headed with electric drive and the future Columbia class ship, it's a real change for us in NAVC and a lot of the emphasis on what we're working on here. And so there's real emphasis for us on the ships going forward. So we're going to talk about some of those first-of-class issues. We're going to talk about the programs that are going on right now. We'll put those in the context of the force structure assessment. We'll also talk a little bit about how that fits into Admiral Rowden's vision of sea control and distributed lethality. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the first panelist, which is Admiral Mike Haycock from the Coast Guard. Mike, over to you.
Well, good morning. I was told no slides and keep it short, so I have no slides. They say that you only remember about 15% what you hear, so I have done the pleasure for you of eliminating the 85% that's not important. I'm only going to give the 15%. So I'm the PEO for Coast Guard acquisition programs. We have about 17 programs, and I don't have time to go through all those. I'm going to focus on the most important ones that are surface, because since it's the surface Navy. And I'm just going to dive in. I'm just going to give you a little teaser on these things, and then if there's more interest, you can hit me with questions during the question and answer period, or I'll be here all day. You can grab me out of the crowd and ask questions later on if you have them. So let me start with the National Security Cutter. That is the replacement for high endurance cutters. They're being built by Huntington Ingalls, program of record 9. They're about 418 feet long, 4,500 tons, and in terms of contributing to distributed lethality, These are as close to being a Navy asset as we have. These things are designed to integrate with the Navy in time of war. We got a lot of Navy-owned systems on board in terms of weapon systems and C4IT systems, that sort of thing, to allow us to do that. So one of the things I think is the strengths that the NSC brings to that picture is the fact that since we are kind of a kindler, gentler service, we're not as, I don't think we're as intimidating to some nations. You can use the Coast Guard to go in and do nation building and have some of those conversations without getting people's defenses up, because they're dealing with the white hulls as opposed to gray hulls. In the interim, we have information systems on board, so we can contribute to the common operational picture, and we have weapon systems on board that we can contribute to the Navy's distributed lethality as well. Admiral Moore asked us to talk a little bit about first in class. If I was going to pick out probably the biggest lesson learned on the NSC in terms of first class, this is probably not unlike any other first class issue, but that is we were aggressive on NSC. We need to get those things built fast. So we went into production with a design that wasn't nearly as mature as we'd like it to be. And so there were design issues that were maturing through production. And so things like the stern launch recovery system was something we struggled with, trying to get that right. And I think we're on a good glide slope for that. And the structural portions of the ship in terms of its service life was another thing we've worked through. And because we really need to press on with the construction, we had to build those changes into hulls 3 and beyond. And on hulls 1 and 2, we're doing a post-delivery availability sort of event right now, even as we speak, to finish that work. Next program we have in terms of size for cutter size, the OPC, our offshore patrol cutter, 360-ish feet long. It is going to be the workhorse of the Coast Guard fleet. So we're going to be building about 25 of these things, and we just awarded this contract in this past September to Eastern Shipbuilding. So this ship is going to replace our medium endurance cutter class. We have medium endurance cutters that are over 60 years old, and so we need these ships desperately. These things are going to contribute to the common operational picture in the Caribbean, in the Atlantic, in the Eastern Pacific, and we look forward to these things contributing to the Western Hemisphere strategy that our Commandant has in terms of having a presence in Central America in combating transnational trafficking organizations. Next program after OPC is our fast response cutters. These are patrol boats, and these are replacing our 110-foot patrol boats, and these are a vast improvement the 110s. Riding a 110 is like riding a bunking Bronco. It is a very lively ride. It's very hard on the crew. Our new fast response cutters are a much better ride. They're larger. They're far more capable. These things have an endurance of about a week. They can do about 28 knots. They're nimble, they're quick, and they can definitely contribute to distributed lethality in the littorals. We are about halfway through the delivery cycle for these things. The program record for these is 56. We delivered just over 20 now, and the Phase 2 contract for the remaining 30 was awarded this past spring. And that's awarded to Bollinger, who's doing a great job building those ships and turning them out. Probably the next most important thing that we're working on is our icebreaker. This is something that's been getting a lot of press and a lot of visibility. We hit the decks running with this probably last March when we had an industry day that was very well attended. We had one-on-one sessions with industry to learn some of the things that they could bring to bear and try to refine the acquisition strategy. We put an RFI, request for information, out this past fall, kind of with kind of our top-level acquisition schedule on how we think we can approach this. Our motto for the icebreaker is fast, and affordable and simple. All right, so we're looking to leverage design work that's already been done on other icebreakers so that it doesn't take us 10 years to build an icebreaker. So our aggressive schedule has us trying to get one of these things delivered in 23. And so we just put a request for proposals out for some industry studies, kind of modeling that process after what the Navy's done on some of their amphibs and their auxiliaries, trying to capitalize on those lessons learned and get industry involved up front and early on that so we can get a successful, quick acquisition. The key performance parameters for the icebreaker is break 6 to 8 feet of ice at 3 knots, penetrate ridged ice at 21 feet thick, and an endurance of 80 to 90 days. And the final KPP is Type 1, Type 2, Type 3 secure comms to deal with interagency issues. So we anticipate that this icebreaker can be a tremendous national security asset up in the Arctic, and we look forward to that integrating with the Navy and collecting intel and being a presence up there. So, and I think that's probably good for me, sir.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. The Coast Guard it is an interesting program. This is we're working very closely on the NAVSEA side with the Coast Guard on this, and the funding mechanism for this platform is a little bit different than we've probably ever done before. So it's through DHS, but it's almost like an SCN funded availability. So we're going to work pretty closely on this, and we're looking forward to getting the Coast Guard cutter. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to the Program Executive Officer for Ships, Rear Admiral Bill Gallinis.
Yeah, hey, good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to be here this morning. I've got just one chart. I'm going to leave that up there. I'm not really going to talk to it, but it just kind of gives you an idea of the ships that were delivered in 2016, and then what we have kind of in the pipeline, in construction, or getting ready to put under contract, and then a little bit on some of the future work. But what I really want to tell you here this morning, and kind of the principal message, is really across the PEO shipbuilding portfolio, is the programs are stable. And, you know, we've got some very proven hull forms that are being built. The surface combatant, the DDG-51 class, we're clearly very familiar with that platform. On the amphib side, the LPD-17 hull form is being built down south by Ingalls. Again, a well proven hull form. And then even the LHA, and, you know, which is really kind of an extension of the LHD program. So for the big major you know, surface combatant programs, good solid hull forms. And, but we do have some design changes that we're working through right now with a number of the shipyards, principally on the DDG-51 program going to the Flight 3 program. Our intent right now is to procure 3 of these Flight 3 DDGs with the ships that are currently appropriated. And then as we work toward the next multi-year that we expect to get out later this year, those ships will all be Flight 3s. And those, as you well know, you know, they just bring a tremendous increase in the capability, the warfighting capability for those platforms with the AMDR radar, principally an upgraded electrical plant, which is really kind of from a ship construction perspective, you know, something we're working closely with the shipyards, and then an increased, you know, cooling capacity that goes along with that. But a lot of, you know, fairly significant design change there on the 51 class, and you know, you'll start seeing those ships go under contract here later this year. On the LPD side, again, you know, as we transition from the LPD variant to the LXR. And that is the strategy right now. You know, we just delivered LPD 26 last year, the John Murtha, which is now in San Diego. 27 is under contract and in construction, and we expect to take her to sea later this year. But again, like I said, a very proven hull form. And you know, as we make that transition from LPD to LXR, again, you know, it's really kind of a step increase and just an evolution in terms of how we continue to mature that. And then on the LHA program, the big design change there as we go from LHA 7, which is under contract or under construction right now, down in Ingalls, just over 50% complete, almost 60% complete. We'll transition to LHA 8, where we reinstall the well deck on that ship. And again, you know, working through the contracting and design phases on that effort. So again, you know, stability across the shipbuilding programs. Some significant design changes in the 3 programs that I just mentioned. The other thing I would offer is, you know, as I kind of had a chance to visit the shipyards last year coming into this, is the level of quality, which is something we always look at. And I would tell you, we got, there's a good high level of quality, I would say, in all the shipyards that we're working with right now. And I would offer you know, the most recent example of that is the 2 destroyers that we just took to trials right at the end of the year. From the DDG-51 program. Both performed very well going through not only their builders trials but acceptance trials as well. So, you know, pleased with where we are and progressing in that area. The other thing, just to kind of talk, and then I'll get into just a little bit on some of the programs, but, you know, to look at the what I've referred to the 355 ship Navy and how we get there, right? So, you know, I would tell you as I kind of look, and we're working closely with the shipyards on this to you know, kind of get their input on how we transition there. But, you know, I would tell you from a shipbuilding perspective, the capacity is there. And I think you've probably heard that in a number of different forms, you know, this week. What I kind of look at is how we ramp up to that capacity, and how we, it's the change mechanism there as we go from the current build profile to maybe an increased build profile. And so as we do that, as I said, the capacity in the shipyards is there. What we need to be mindful of is probably our vendor base that support the shipyards for both GFE and CFE equipment, okay? And so we need to watch, especially some of the smaller companies, the piece parts that flow into these shipyards to build these ships. That's where I think we may have some of our challenges. And again, working with the shipyards, what is the right way to do that? Do we need to resequence some of the funding to provide, some of the facility improvements for some of the vendors that, that may be challenged? The things that come to mind are electrical, the power electronics and electrical plants for switchboards. Admiral Moore talked about the electric ship. There's a lot of work going on in that area. Hydraulic vendors, another area. Again, my sense is the industrial base will size to the demand signal. We just need to be mindful of how we transition to that increased demand signal. The other thing that I think inside the Navy lifelines that we need to consider is the acquisition workforce and the stress and where we may have some challenges there. And I would offer up our contracting team is probably the one area that right at the front, the stress that we have on that. And I would tell you, from the waterfront to the Navy Yard, the contracts organizations across the Navy right now are stressed. It's a hard organization to get people into. It takes a fair amount of experience and training to get a good contracting officer to the point to be manage contracts and procure contracts. And so that's an area we'll need to work through. But I think I don't see anything that's insurmountable, and I think there's a good opportunity, and we'll work again with industry and with Navy leadership on how we implement that. Let me just talk a little bit about DDG 1000. So as everybody knows here, we Bath Iron Works delivered DDG 1000 last year to the Navy. She sailed from the East Coast to San Diego the last couple of months in the November, December timeframe of last year, and not without some challenges, right? And as I tell the crew, and I tell you, we were very fortunate. We got a tremendous crew on 1000, and I think most of you know Jim Kirk and now Captain Tate, who just recently took over, but just a tremendous crew. But as I tell them when I have a chance to talk to them, I mean they write history on that ship every day, and as she sailed around. We experienced some challenges, and I'll just highlight two areas in particular. One is with coolers, and principally three different types of coolers: air coolers for the propulsion motors, lube oil coolers also for the propulsion motors, and coolers for the dynamic brake resistors that actually kind of slow the motors down when we're going from changing speeds of the ship. So I will tell you, we've got the best folks from government and industry looking at this, doing the root cause, and I feel pretty confident we're going to come through these, and we'll have the fix in place by the time we get through the combat system activation industrial period that's getting ready to start in San Diego in the March timeframe. So I think we're working to really understand that. There's a number of I'll say options out there in terms of how we address that, whether it's a material change, a design change, maybe a piping change to in terms of the flowing through the coolers, or maybe even an operational change in how we operate the coolers. So a number of items that we can do there. The other area that I'll mention is kind of in the power electronics and control systems, right? So really. The first in many years, at least in the surface fleet, for us to kind of work with and operate an electric plant. And, so we're learning a lot about the power electronics involved there, all the way from the generators to the propulsion motors and the control system that controls that. So, again, working, with industry and then with inside the Navy lifelines, I think we're gaining a much better appreciation for where the problems are with the power electronics, and again, at this point, I don't see anything that's insurmountable, and we'll get that fixed, and the team's working hard on that. But I would say, we're going to continue to learn about this class of ships, and, especially as we start to consider options for the next surface combatant, there's an awful lot that we're going to learn from DDG 1000. It's just every day, the more I learn about the program, just a tremendous effort by, by industry and everyone that's involved in as well as on the Navy side. I talked a little bit about the DDG 51 Flight 3, and again, our challenge right now, we're working, our intent is to procure 3 of those ships, as I mentioned, working with, the 2 principal shipyards, Ingalls and BIW, and, our intent is to get those ships under contract here in 2017. I think, we're on a path to do that. One of the things that we continue to look at is, I'll say, the concurrency of the design in some ways. As we continue to complete the electric plant design and the concurrent testing that goes along with that, I would tell you across the program, there's a good process in place between the Navy Program Office, the Navy's technical community, and industry to, to balance those risks as we go to put these, put these ships under contract. And then just real quickly, just to kind of wrap it up, I'm not going to hit every program, but again, on the Amphib Force, I talked about LPD transition to LXR. A lot of good work going on in that. LPD 26, was a clean delivery last year in 2016, and we look forward to LPD 27 as we kind of get through, get through her trials here later this year, and LPD 28 just went under contract right toward the end of the year. The other ship, frankly, that we're bringing into the fleet now is the Expeditionary Staging Base. So, this ship gets turned over to the Military Sea Lift Command. It's got a fairly sizable Navy detachment on board for the flight deck and some of the operational demands of the ship. Very, very capable ship. We've got the Lewis Puller right now is in Norfolk, going through her PSA availability as we get ready to deploy her later this year, and she'll be the replacement for the Ponce over in the 5th Fleet. So another just tremendous capability that's coming into the fleet, being built by NASCO San Diego. So with that, sir, I think I'll stop there, and I look forward to your questions. Okay,
thanks, Bill. Now I have Rear Admiral John Neagley, who's the Program Executive Officer of Littoral Combat Ships.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about LCS with you this morning. I wanted to talk to you a little bit in terms of the operational context. So we have now deployed 3 LCSs out to Singapore, an area of the world that's pretty important to us. $5 trillion worth of trade kind of goes through that area. We've had 500 days at sea. We've, as a presence mission, we've operated with over 8 nations doing flight operations with helicopters. We've done boardings with 7 different nations. With the shallow draft that ship provides, it's opened up a wide range of ports that we never had access to before, and that's bringing great capability for us, particularly in the sea control mission. It also demonstrated the flexibility of the ship. We've done special operation forces with the Marine Corps as part of Korea, real world operations with humanitarian assistance during Typhoon Haiyan, and really the search and rescue efforts for Air Asia flight. So the ship is demonstrating its capability, its flexibility, its role in sea control, and it is proving that out right now as part of those deployments. And I will tell you now, with the deployment LCS-4, which now has a harpoon capability, that's really our first instantiation of having a distributed lethality capability on that ship. So that adds to the capability and adds to what value that these ships are bringing to the sea control mission. So if you look at where we are programmatically, we have, I have 2 shipyards with great shipyard partners. My partners, Lockheed Martin, Fincantieri Marinette Marine, working ships up in Marinette, Wisconsin, in Oslo, USA, down in Mobile, Alabama, both producing ships on 6-month centers. We have, I will tell you that we entered a block buy with those shipbuilders. I tell you, the block buy brought a tremendous amount of stability into the program. It allowed our shipyard partners to invest in those shipyards, get the infrastructure right to help us deliver ships on 2 a year on 6-month centers, get the manning right, the trained workforce, really control costs through EOQ, really an effective strategy for us, and it's brought a lot of stability into that shipbuilding program. We have 9 ships delivered, and again, we're delivering about 2 a year, and I'll deliver 4 next year in FY17. I have 7 ships under contract, another 7 ships in construction, another 6 ships under contract. And the C-frame itself, the ship has really completed all its IoT and events. We finished up full ship shock trials this summer and fall, and that was really the last C-frame qualification event that we had. And then, and both variants have now deployed, forward deployed to Singapore. So we're capturing a lot of great lessons learned from those deployment, rolling them back into the ships in construction, and as the ships go through PSA. And it's also helping to inform the frigate design and the frigate work. All the ships are, from a cost perspective, all the ships are delivering under the congressional cost cap. So we've seen significant learning in both shipyards, and I think that really is a product of this block buy strategy that's brought real stability to the shipbuilding programs. Frigate, we are on track to down select to a frigate no later than FY19. So we're working through those design turns to make sure that we have a good, mature design before we issue that RFP and before we kind of go into a contract, and the teams are working that very, very closely. So from a lessons learned perspective, we're getting great feedback from the fleet. We're rolling those lessons learned very quickly. You can see just on these 2 charts, and I won't go through all of it, but if you look at the first 4 ships to the changes that we made in the block buy ships, we've really gone after reliability issues that related to lethality and survivability into the block buy ships, really lessons learned based on those first 4 ships that we've deployed. Some examples of that on the Freedom class, the initial ships that we had some ship service diesel generators were not particularly reliable. We did a complete design turn on those. In the block buy ships, we have not seen any of those kind of issues. We're learning operational lessons learned. So on Freedom class, we had a stern ramp, and we realized to launch the 11-meter rib, it was better to be able to store that 11-meter rib on that stern ramp because we could kind of do it quicker and meet our operational timelines much more quicker. So we strengthened the stern ramp on our follow-on ships, and that's just a lesson learned. We're learning from fleet operations real time. Same on the Austral variant. Some great feedback from the crews on the engineering control systems in terms of HSI improvements to kind of make it simple and cleaner to operate, as well as some strengthening mods we've done to AMAS based on some experience we've had with tugs and operating the ships in the fleet. So what I'm telling you is we capture lessons learned very, very quickly. We look for the right place to incorporate those in either in the construction or as a backfit, and we're learning quickly. Mission packages, my point here on the mission package is probably one of the most powerful things about the LCS program is what we established really at the onset of the program, which is an interface control document, an ICD. And the ICD really defined all the physical, mechanical, electrical software interfaces required to bring a mission package on board. So I can bring a mission package, any mission package on any ship, any time, because we've really been adhered to that ICT document that really unlocks the flexibility of the ship. It allows us to bring new equipment on quickly. It allows us to refresh technology. It allows us to try new things. It allows people to come to the table as long as they meet those interface standards. We can drive that capability quickly. Just a couple quick examples that this week we're loading SSSM, which is the Hellfire Longbow capability, which is the next increment of the surface mission package onto USS Detroit. And we're doing that in a couple days. We're just dropping it down the weapon zone. She's going to go out, test with that new capability as part of her sea squat, and we were able to do that very, very quickly because of the flexibility and modularity of the ship. Down south and off of New Orleans, we're operating right now a common unmanned surface vehicle, aluminum hull, but that hull is built from the ground up to interface with both C-frames. We know how to launch and recover it. We know how to talk to it. We know how to do post-mission analysis with other sensors we have on it. Right now it's an unmanned influence sweep system, but that's what the ICD provide you. And that's how we can kind of control those interfaces, and that really what opens up the flexibility of the ship and provides that combat power for us. So I will just tell you the demand signal for LCS is strong. The kind of sea control missions this platform does, it does very, very well. But because it does it well, it frees up other platforms, the DGs, CGs, to do the higher end missions. So this right high-low mix in the fleet architecture is important, and LCS plays an important role in that. And we're delivering. The costs are stable, largely because of that block buy contract. We're delivering the ships under the cost cap. Shipbuilders have done a great job facilitating their yards, getting a trained workforce to deliver good quality ships. Our delivery metrics continue to improve. As Bill talked about trials, the number of trial cars or discrepancies we've seen is continuing to trend downward. We delivered Gabriel Gifford's here, LCS 10, right before Christmas, and 0 star cards at delivery. Star cards are things you have to fix before the ship sails away, and so that's really the quality and the conduct of those trials is just getting better and better. And we're incorporating lessons learned. We are tightly linked with the fleets, really as part of the 60-day study, but also getting lessons learned from the fleets that are forward deployed out in Singapore, with our ships that are conducting operations as part of their qualification trials. We're capturing those real time and finding the right place to incorporate those lessons learned to make sure that we take full advantage of that operational experience.
All right, thanks, John. With that, I'd like to introduce our new Program Executive Officer for Integrated Warfare Systems, Rear Admiral Doug Small.
Hi. So we support the other PEOs by delivering, of course, the combat power that enables sea control, which is the subject of this conference. I'm going to hit on about 3.5 topics just to kind of get questions flowing, hopefully. But I want to make sure that as a takeaway, next week we're having 2 industry days in our 30-year combat power war room. Hopefully for the industry guys here, you've signed up for that. There's both a large and a small business, 2 separate days. So hope to see you there, where you can see everything that we're doing for the next 30 plus years in combat systems. So please take advantage of that. We want to make sure that everybody knows in what direction the Navy's headed, so that we're all rowing in the same direction. So with that, the first thing I'd like to talk about, just following on from my friend Admiral Neagley here, providing the over-the-horizon punch to the frigate program is this over-the-horizon missile project that we've just started. So we have a robust conversation going on with industry right now in terms of what we're going to actually procure for this thing. But we've tried to structure it so that we can maintain the most flexibility possible, so that we can get the longest range, size, weight, and power constraints will allow. So anyways, hopefully this is not a surprise to anyone, but this is going on right now. Obviously very serious about it, and it's a huge part of our distributed lethality and sea control with these small surface combatants that have the flexibility that was just described. Next slide. We could take up the rest of the conference here talking about the awesomeness of the Flight 3 destroyer, powered by the Aegis Baseline 10, the next generation Aegis combat system powered by the Air and Missile Defense Radar. This is going to be an amazing sensor suite, and with lethality that is, I'll just say, unmatched. It is an incredible capability that is critically needed, and is going to carry our Navy into the decades to come. So a huge effort, both shipbuilding and combat system, to deliver this capability as soon as we possibly can. It's amazing stuff. Next slide. So also, if you read, and I'm sure everyone read Admiral Roden's strategy, electronic warfare is a huge part of it as well. So, in incremental fashion, we're delivering capabilities that both, I'll say, see everything, and eventually we're going to be able to jam everything from onboard ships and now offboard ships. So the Advanced Offboard EW project was just awarded here recently as well. So the idea is, total, I'd say, theater-wide tactical electronic warfare dominance is where we're headed. And we have the pieces in place that are coming online through development, and some of these are actually fielding now. But electronic warfare is one of those traditionally strong U.S. Navy fields that we intend to stay in front of, I'll say, in perpetuity. So awesome new capabilities coming there. Next slide. And then finally, some of the things that we're doing on is we're trying to get clever on how do we how do we modularize not just the software and the systems themselves, but even the installation. So we want to make sure that, 15, 20 years after we deliver a ship, we don't have to go through a gigantic modernization effort when technology surpasses what we have on there, because it will surpass it. So we're trying to be creative about how do we install our systems to make sure that upgradability remains key throughout the life of the ship. So that's a few of the, I'd call sea control enablers. But again, I invite you to come to the War Room and see this and many other things next week. And with that, I look forward to questions.
Okay, thanks, Doug. So I'm always amazed at the diversity at the Surface Navy Association. I mean, so here you have a Surface Warfare Officer, a moderator that's principally a carrier guy. And I'm about to introduce the officer that runs Program and Executive Officer for submarines. And it's always great. I think it's important that we bring the submariners in to talk about, as the principal platform that protects our battle groups when we go out there. It's nice to have submarines around. And so just thought we'd give you a couple of minutes to talk about what's going on in the submarine world. So Mike Jabaley, over to you.
Thank you, sir. My two principal shipbuilding programs, I'll start with the Columbia ballistic missile submarine, which formerly known as Ohio Replacement, but obviously we have now officially named it and given it a hull number, PCU Columbia SSBN 826. Had a significant event last week with successful completion of Milestone B for the program. That grants us authority to continue into the EMD phase of the program and commence detailed design. The Congress in the current continuing resolution included an anomaly to appropriate SCN money for the program in FY17. So that $773 million of SCN was transferred to the Navy. We placed the first installment of that SCN on contract with Electric Boat last Friday. So we are now expending SCN. We're fully into detailed design. We are about 11% complete with design disclosures, which are the electronic equivalent of drawings. And the focus is firmly on continuing the design with the stated program goal of achieving 83% complete on design disclosures by the 1st of October 2020, which is the official construction start date, the beginning of FY21. So the appropriation of SCN, the completion of Milestone B, and the transition to detailed design are the critical components to making sure that program remains on track. In the Virginia-class submarine program, we are fully 2 per year. We authorized 2 ships in 2011, and with a contract construction span of 66 months, 5.5 years, we are now in the thick of 2 per year delivery. Last year, we delivered the 786 USS Illinois and commissioned her, and early this year we'll deliver 787, and then later this year we'll deliver 788. So those are the Washington and the Colorado. Construction continues to go well in the Virginia program, with ships being delivered within the contracted delivery span and within the contracted budget. The Virginias in the fleet are also performing extremely well. We continue to get great feedback from the force commanders and the type commanders on the tremendous military capability of these ships. With the Block 3 Virginias, our stated goal is now to reduce the post-shakedown availability period to less than 6 months to allow getting them out to the fleet faster. We achieved that on USS John Warner, SSN 785, late last year, and she is now in the fleet. Obviously, the big news in December was the release of the force structure assessment in the submarine world. That raised the attack submarine requirement from 48 SSNs to 66 SSNs. So we went from managing a trough where we were below 48 SSNs later in the 2020s to immediately being in a trough under 66. So we're working hard to develop a revised 30-year shipbuilding program that will take that into account. Obviously, that is a focus for the future on how we're going to meet the new requirements under the force structure assessment. And with that, I'll stop and turn it back over to the commander.
Okay, so just a couple follow-ups. So a little over 3 weeks ago, I had the unique opportunity to sit down for about 2.5 hours with several other Navy flag officers and Air Force generals to talk defense programs with President-elect Trump. And during the course of the exchange, it's pretty clear as a businessman that while he wants to grow the size of the force, I expect as a businessman that he's going to expect some dramatic improvements in the price of our programs. So I'd like to ask each and throw this out to the panel, including the Coast Guard. Where do you see your programs going forward as you ramp up production of these programs and head toward the force structure assessment? Could you give us an idea of some of the things in your programs that you're looking at to not only deliver the product, but to drive affordability into the programs so that we can get the force that we need in what will still be a challenging budget environment? So I'll just open the floor up to anybody that wants to take that question.
My voice is warm, so I'll just keep going.
All right.
So I would phrase it a little bit differently than Bill Gallinis did in his opening remarks. When asked, okay, do you have the capacity to increase? We have the capacity to increase, but in order to do the type of shipbuilding that would be necessary to get to 66 attack submarines, I would say we have the potential. We've obviously done it before. We delivered as many as 6 Los Angeles-class submarines in 1 year in the 1980s at the same time that we were building the Ohio-class SSBN. So the potential is there. The question is, at what point do you need to start building more facilities, hiring more people? We're already in the middle of a facilities expansion and a significant employee ramp-up at our shipbuilders just to handle the increased demand signal brought by the Columbia SSBN. So now to figure out how to get the Navy to 66 attack submarines in the right amount of time without breaking the submarine construction enterprise, obviously additional employee ramp up, additional facilities will be required. And so we're doing that hard work right now to figure out what the recommended posture is to get us to 66. But it's all very early, and yes, the potential is there, but the capacity needs additional facilities and employees to do a shipbuilding program of that size and pace.
Okay, yeah, Mike, thanks, Mike. Yeah, John, over to you.
So I'll just add, leveraging the hot production lines, I think is a kind of a key strategy for us. So in terms of LCS, we have two production lines with 2 different shipyards. Taking advantage of that investment that already has occurred in those shipyards, both from a people standpoint and an infrastructure standpoint is important. And as I talked about before, kind of these multi-ship strategies, a block buy being one of them, from a production standpoint, provides a lot of advantages. It provides you a lot of kind of stability, predictability in the approach, and it doesn't take away from the flexibility of anybody to kind of adjust the block buy. But I think those kind of approaches, leveraging hot production lines, looking at block buy or multi-ship kind of contracts are critical at getting there quickly.
So I would just add on to that, I think anything you can do to drive stability into the process helps you bring costs down. And so I talked about, really on the surface side, the stability of the designs. And if you look at some of our more successful shipbuilding programs over time, and like in the surface combatant area, for example, and you start with the 963, the Spruance class destroyer, went to the Ticonderoga class cruiser, then on to the Arleigh Burke, and there were incremental changes along the way, but generally, from the 963, from the destroyer to the cruiser, we kept the same hull form, changed the combat systems, from the cruiser to the destroyer, changed the hull form, but kept the combat systems, and so, that's kind of what we're doing. We continue to do that on the Flight 3s, okay? So, essentially the same hull form, although I would argue we're kind of bumping up against the margin limits right now with the Flight 3, but bringing in a new combat systems and a little bit on the HM&E side with the electric plant and the cooling, LPD, again, a proven hull form, you know, incrementally moving on to LXR, and then same thing on the LHA side. So design stability, I think, is another piece. And then the last thing I'd just kind of throw in there, I think, is commonality, and particular commonality in material. And any time that we can do that, you know, especially where you have, you know, multiple product lines in a shipyard, if we can leverage commonality of components and piece parts and whatnot, that would help us as well.
Okay.
I would just throw out that funding stability is helpful as well. Knowing what you're going to get and when you're going to get it helps us to intelligently plan out our projects and execute them. If you know, CRs, things like that, that makes it very challenging. And so what would be very helpful is if we knew upfront what we were going to get. And, you know, one of the things we struggle with the Coast Guard is aging infrastructure. I mentioned earlier that our medium endurance cutters, some of them are 60 years old. Our high endurance cutters are some of them are 50 years old. Our inland fleet, I think the Commandant mentioned this yesterday, is aging as well. I think Smilax turned 32 or 72 back in November, I think. So, you know, our inland fleet, you know, that program's been kind of nursed along, kept on life support for a long time. So what we'd like to know is, you know, is it important? We think it is. And if it is, then we need a funding stream that we know we can count on to make progress with the actual acquisition. Now, I guess the last thing I throw out is, I think it's a good question to ask industry as well. So there are certainly programs can be extended. You can add hulls on to the end of a build. You can try to ramp up production and build them faster. But oftentimes, industry, you know, they don't have just one customer. They've got a very closely woven, finally meshed program they're trying to put together with other ships. And so we need to find what does industry need to support accelerated shipbuilding as well. Our FRC program, I think Bollinger is working hard, but I think to expedite that, they would need some infrastructure increases to do that because they're cranking them out pretty fast as it is.
Okay, so I just spent the last couple days actually up in submarine land. Secretary Stackley reminded me when I took over the job there was more to life than aircraft carriers, and so every once in a while I have to get up into the Northeast. But so got a great tour up there, and it was kind of interesting. I didn't realize at the time that we had planned to build 30 Seawolf submarines, and we ended up building 3. So there's some parallels to today, and I was kind of struck by that. On the other hand, the submarine community has made great use of the 3 Seawolf submarines, and they are in high demand today across the board. And I firmly believe that DDG 1000 will be the same, and there's some parallels there in a great ship. But we only touched on it briefly, and so what I wanted to go, the point of this is, where are we from the surface Navy's perspective with the future surface combatant, given where we are with DDG 1000 and where we're headed next? Where do you see, what are we learning today on the first-of-class ships that we have across the board here, whether it's DDG 1000, LCS, et cetera, and what should we be doing to prepare ourselves for the future service combatant to ensure a successful program akin to what we're seeing with Virginia-class submarine as a follow-on to Seawolf? So I'll just open up the floor to that. Anybody wants to talk to that?
So just a couple things. I would offer that, you know, as we talked about, you know, from a stability perspective, design stability is critical, right? So get the design right, make sure you have the right fidelity in that design before you start construction. Don't rush into concerns of design and construction that's fraught with both cost risk and technical risk. So I think it's important to spend the time to kind of get the design right and fully vetted and understood. I do think there is great value in kind of flexible architectures or modular architectures. So future surface pads of the future should retain some of that flexibility as part of their program.
And I'd add on to that with what we don't want to do is change out everything hull form and combat system. And you know, one of the things we've been trying to do is predict what combat systems will be required in that time frame, no matter what the ship is. And so that's, you know, laying out an incremental path to, you know, the types of capabilities that the Navy is going to need in the next decades. That work has been, you know, laid out, and we're working with certainly with ONR and every other organization to bring in the most advanced eye-watering type capabilities and make sure that they have a place to land either on future surface combatant or on any other surface combatant that's running one of our combat systems in the day. So incremental improvements of tremendous capability is really the path for the combat system.
Yes, sir. I would just add, I think what I'm seeing is, you know, as we learn more from DDG 1000, and I work with Admiral Small and his team and kind of where they're going, their vision on the combat system side, you know, electric power is the foundation that's going to support, you know, that warfighting capability going forward. And, you know, designing an integrated electric plant that has some type of energy storage capability as we evolve the weapon systems is, I think, is going to be key. You know, so I think that's where we're really going to focus some time on as we start thinking about what the next surface combatant looks like over the next few years.
Okay. Looks like we might have a question on the floor. Sir, do you want?
Yeah, Tom, I appreciate it, and I'm fascinated by the panel, but you being a carrier kind of guy and not addressing carriers is kind of like, there's a big question in the room. All these things apply to the carrier programs as well, so maybe you could find time to comment on some of that first off. The second thing is I just finished some work with Paul Schneider and others on carrier technologies, and what were the issues that prompted some problems on going forward with the Ford class that we had there. And a common theme on them there was a really lack of land-based test facilities to bring these new technologies forward. And I would ask, perhaps Admiral Small and others could comment to the importance of ensuring that when you bring these technologies forward, we have this ability to bring these land-based test facilities to properly vet them and get these technologies to allow that rapid insertion.
Okay, that's great. Why don't I just, let's go with that first. And Mike Jabaley, maybe, you know, relative to what you're doing with Columbia, you can also talk to the land-based test facility. I think that's a good comment. So I'll throw it down to you and to Doug next, and we'll work our way down here.
Sure. There's two components to the Columbia program that are really critical. First is an extensive prototyping effort that we've already been in for the last year and a half or so, using R&D funding to prototype various parts of the ship with the full intent that they will be successful and will be consumed in the first ship. So the most significant one is the missile tube module. That is the section. Taking a step back, the overall design of Columbia, as much as possible, reuses the design of the Virginia-class submarine. The missile compartment is obviously the section that doesn't. And so by prototyping that one first and learning everything you can about how to build that de-risks the schedule for completion. And as you know, we're on a very tight timeline. The other one, which is run by our partners at Naval Reactors, is the compatibility test facility, which is being built in Philadelphia. And that site will allow complete endurance testing of the integrated propulsion system, which is the other significant part which is not present on the Virginia. That's the electric drive system. So the actual components which will be built will be assembled in a complete system and run on an endurance test bed in Philadelphia. And that, again, de-risks the integration of new technology, de-risks the schedule overall for the construction of the ship, and is a significant way of ensuring the program's success.
Over to me, I guess. Wow, great question, Admiral. Appreciate that one. That was a joke. No, you know, land-based testing before you go to a ship, that's all goodness, and we don't have to. I won't bore everyone with the history of how we got to where we got, but we do have a land-based test site. We have been testing our systems at a land-based test site before they go to Ford, and we will do the same thing for Kennedy. The robustness of a land-based test site is always a good discussion. How much of the system do you want at the land-based test site? Do you want the entire electrical distribution system at a land-based test site firing, you know, all faces, 6 faces of a phased array radar? Somewhere between everything and what we have today is probably the right answer. So, but you know, going forward, all of that stuff is in the plan. There's a lot of reasons why we have the configuration we have today on the land-based test site. But the other thing I'll say is that, you know, if it hadn't been for the snowstorm that we just had, we would be through with the combat system rehearsal on CVN 78. So we are making tremendous progress on that ship. and will deliver an amazing capability to the fleet, both on 78 and on 79.
Either one of you guys?
No, I think that there's tremendous value in land-based test sites, specific to LCS, given what our acquisition strategy was, the first two ships were R&D ships, yet to be determined what would be the follow-on. So I think there was not that investment made up front, but there's certainly, looking back upon it, there's certainly value there.
Okay, so I had thanks for the questions, and I'll kind of talk about the forward in the context of kind of the future surface combatant. We certainly have learned a lot on forward, and your comments relative to land-based test facilities, et cetera, is certainly a key point. I think one of the key things is whether you're talking Columbia or you're talking DDG-1000 or LCS or Flight 3 or building the icebreaker for the Coast Guard or even the Ford class technology is when you're going to move into an era where you're going to go to leap ahead technology, you are by definition going to take on some risk. And I like to tell the staff, hey, we don't build toasters. Okay, these are complex pieces of machinery that are going to be out at the tip of the spear, the tip of war for in the case of Ford class for 94 years. And so we choose to take leap ahead technologies that in many cases we haven't been able to fully vet out before. And some of those things, in a high velocity learning environment, you can't possibly design everything into it up front. Having said that, I think land-based testing is clearly one of the ways that you can reduce risk. And I think, in hindsight, on the Ford class, we would have done more land-based testing than we had done. But having said that, the ship's ready to deliver, and I think the nation's going to get a fantastic ship going forward. When I was the PEO for carriers, I often used to, I would pull out three. I would tell people, being the first of class of anything is hard, and it comes with its lumps and its bumps and its bruises. And I'd pull out as a proof of it. I'd say, here's 3 Washington Post articles that were written about and I just want you to. I'm going to read some quotes from these articles, and would say the first one would say. The Navy's billion-dollar black hole, and then so I'd set that article aside, and then I'd say the Navy's acquisition nightmare, and I'd turn that article over, and then I'd read building a Cadillac when we only needed a Volkswagen, and then I'd pause because I'd be getting all these nods from people saying, yep, that's exactly what you did on Ford, and I'd say, now, 60 ships later, DDG-51's doing pretty well. Because there were the same articles that were written about DDG-51. So this is not to make excuses about Ford, but as we head into the future surface combatant, we have to recognize if you want to take a leap ahead in technology and you really want to provide that capability gap against our competitors out there, then we're going to lean forward. And we don't build toasters. We don't build Toyotas. We build high-end machinery, the most complex things in the world. And the American worker is the most ingenious worker out there. And our track record is we take the most complex pieces of machinery in the world, whether it's a Tomcat or a Super Hornet or a Joint Strike Fighter or a DDG-1000 or a Ford-class carrier, we get it out there. Certainly have challenges, but 5 to 10 years from now, people are going to be wondering what all the hullabaloo was. And these will be great platforms, whether we're talking LCS, DDG-1000, Columbia-class, and Ford. The one thing you can count on is these are going to be great platforms that are going to do great things for the nation going forward. So I appreciate your comments. So back to you.
Thank you. John Harper with National Defense Magazine. My question is for Admiral Jabaley. Sir, in light of the recent FSA, are you concerned that an effort to increase the fleet to 355 ships could undermine the Columbia-class program? If money is, pumped into procuring other types of vessels, such as attack submarines, for example?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I would say that the Navy has stated repeatedly at all levels of leadership that the Columbia SSBN is the #1 priority. So increasing the fleet to 355 ships would not be done at the expense of funding the Columbia. What I am focused on doing is making sure that as the plans to increase the fleet, and in particular, in my world, the submarine force, that we apply that same priority as we increase the facilities, as we increase the manpower, I want to make sure that Columbia remains the #1 priority. There's no margin in the schedule. It has to get out on patrol by fiscal year 31. It is the nation's #1 defense priority as well. So I think you will find that consistent with the statements of our leaders that it remains the #1 priority.
Okay, so I learned a long time ago that when your former bosses ask you questions, you go to them next. And so, so we do have microphones around the room. So, Sydney, I see you there, but I'm going to, in deference to my former boss, I'm going to go over to Paul Sullivan. Paul, over to you.
Hello. Yeah, there we go. So first, to echo Admiral Moore's theme, remember the LPD-17, what a horrendous lead ship that was? Nobody's whining about them anymore. It's a tremendous class of ships. They're just unbelievable, and they'll probably be the basis for the LXR. This one's for Admiral Small. Sorry. We asked all the PEOs that build ships, what are you doing to look at your industrial base to go to 355 ships? But you deliver ship sets of radars, missiles, et cetera. So what are you doing with the Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, GDIS, et cetera, and the second and third tier suppliers? Have you worked on that?
Yes, we have. So,
and?
Well, what I would say is, you know, for us, it represents I'd say a modest increase in what we have to do. It's not even sort of back to the heyday, really, in terms of throughput. There's a few key vendors that we have to pay attention to on throughput, and we are doing that. But I don't see, what I look at it as is an opportunity to capitalize on the increased quantities that we'll be buying to drive down our unit pricing. So that's I look at it as an opportunity to get yet more affordable while delivering the additional capability required.
So you don't think there's a facilitization or a supply food chain issue?
No, there again, a couple of key vendors. Certainly, there will be some. They'll need to do some facilitization, I would imagine. But I don't see it as a huge. It's not an impediment to getting to 355 ships at all.
Thanks.
Okay, the back microphone back here, and then I'll come up here to the front. So, sir, yes. Yes, sir, you.
I'm Ed Walsh with Proceedings. A question for Admiral Neagley. Admiral, can you give us some perspective on the status of the design work for the frigate?
Sure. Our current strategy is to down select frigate no later than 19. We're going to release that RFP here probably next month. Both industry teams have been kind of working on the maturity of the design. We've been doing those design reviews with the NAVC Technical Authority. So we've been working build spec revisions kind of back and forth to make sure we get a clean kind of build spec this summer and a clean kind of design. And what we've said is we will do a gating function, a formal kind of design review, really chaired by O5D, our technical authority, prior to RFP release to make sure that we have the requisite maturity in design that we're comfortable with our industry partners bidding on. So I think it's a compressed timeline. Teams are working hard on that, but that's our path as we kind of go forward.
Okay, thanks, John. Sydney?
Sidney Friedberg, Breaking Defense. One of the great things about working in this field is I always learn new things. Mere humanities major. And a year ago, I did not know the phrase engineering casualty. This year, that's burned into my brain. And we've had those on LCS, we've had those on DG-1000. We had a turbine generator fault, which is a sort of kindred issue with the Ford. That was one of the issues, along with some of the very high-tech systems. I mean, is there some systematic issue that's going on here? Because this is not, the very cutting edge phased array radars or electromagnetic arresting gear that we're having these problems with. It seems like it's sort of basic hull mechanical engineering, but clearly something is hiccuping consistently across programs.
Yeah, let me take a crack at that from as ComNavC, since they kind of all fall under my cognizance. So one we characterize that all of these are simple HM&E systems. Okay, so several of these systems are very complex, high power generation systems that are in fact are some cutting edge things. We have looked in detail across all three programs at the root causes of all these to see are there some systemic issues that are causing these. We have not found any systemic issues across the programs. We have found issues that as you look through these, in the case of the Ford class, the very complex set of electrical system controls that in hindsight I don't think that anybody could have anticipated what we would have seen in advance. On DDG 1000, I think that's probably I would say is the exception in terms of it is kind of interesting that DDG 1000 is a very complex, and I can let Bill comment a little bit more, electronic control system, but the casualties, and by the way, that term's been familiar to me for the last 37 years, I think what's frustrated us in DDG 1000 is that we've had lube oil coolers since NOAA had an ARC, so what's the cause there? And so we're still really working our way through what the root causes are there. I think it's from our standpoint, it's a key reminder that these are even lube oil coolers. Even though the ships are complex systems, relatively simple things can cause these ships to have problems. And so when you design these systems, while you tend to put a lot of your focus and energy into the very complex engineered systems and the radars and something, you can't forget about the fact that the basic blocking and tackling with some of these other core systems is important. Over on LCS, some of the casualties are certainly training related. I don't think that it's a design issue that, if you run a diesel without lube oil in it, it's going to have a problem. Just as if you don't run your car home tonight and there's no oil on it, you're going to have problems with that car. So, some of those are training issues. We're going to work our way through those. I think there is some new issues. Some of the couplings and some of the gearing that we'd used in LCS is new stuff to us, and we're learning it. So I'm convinced that we haven't found systemic issues. We have worked our way through these issues with technical rigor. Where they are training or logistical related, I think we fix those things. And I think, and you're going to see as we start to get more runtime in these platforms that the reliability of the platforms will go up. But it's certainly a valid question, and it's had my full attention here for the last 7 months that I've been in command. So I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything else in on their particular platforms on that. No? Okay. One over here, Megan, and I'll come back to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Ivan Luke from the Naval War College. I've got a question for Admiral Haycock. Since perhaps the most fundamental tenet of distributed lethality is being able to hold multiple adversary targets at risk from diverse threat vectors, it seems almost too good to pass up to add your 9 high-end cutters and your 25 OPCs into the mix. Has there been discussion, and would it be feasible to backfit them with offensive weapons like the over-the-horizon missile that they're talking about?
So is it feasible? I think the answer is probably yes. I think it's just a matter of sitting down, doing the engineering work, figure out what sort of margins we still have after construction that we can consume to do that sort of work. Look at the structure to see if the structure can support the weapon systems. I don't think there's anything new there. Navy's been doing complex weapon systems installations and backfits for years. So I think it's really a matter of real estate, having enough real estate on the ship, and having sufficient margins in terms of weight and things like that. I personally haven't heard any talk about it. I think typically those things come up during the Navy staff talks, and as I know that we've done that in the past, and we've had harpoon weapon systems put on 378s, and we got close-in weapon systems on the 378s and the NSCs and that sort of thing. We try to build some margins in to provide that flexibility so that when the threats change in the future, we can adapt to it. And it's really just a matter of working with the Navy to figure out where we can augment them and then working through the technical aspects of installing them. Does that answer your question?
Sure, thanks.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question, and so Megan, over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Megan Eckstein with USNI News. Sticking with distributed lethality, obviously some of the ideas such as Maritime, Tomahawk, and SM-6 were meant to bring new capability without adding new gear to the ships. But I was wondering if you guys are finding with other ideas if you've been constrained by space weight and power issues, and if so, how that's affecting designs such as the frigate and the LXR that are based on existing hull forms.
Yes, I mean, so, you know, just kind of staying with that same theme of utilizing existing systems and extending our reach, you know, to the maximum, say, kinematic range. We're looking across the entire department, really, for how to connect sensors and weapons that exist today within, you know, that are fielded. So yes, there's an ongoing robust dialogue, certainly within the Navy, but even, you know, across the department on how to do that. So I guess the answer is yes.
Yeah, so in regards to your questions about frigates, so we have allocated a swap, a pretty conservative swap for over-the-horizon missiles based on what the outcome of the competition is. So we'll be able to accommodate whatever the outcome of the competition is in the frigate design.
You mentioned LXR, so I think you're familiar. You know, the LPDs were initially designed to accommodate, you know, 16-cell VLS launcher up forward. That capability exists in the LPDs, although frankly, as we built the class over time, we kind of atrophied some of the supporting systems inside the hull, but those could be restored should the Navy decide to do so. And you know, we could probably incorporate that into the LXR as well. I would tell you on the 51 class, you know, those ships, as you well know, are typically designed and built for the, I'll say, the high-end fight, and so, you know, I think we've, being one of our more successful shipbuilding program, you've kind of seen over time how we've evolved, you know, the sensor suite, the C4I suite, the weapons systems on board there to, you know, to outpace the threat. So we'll continue to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'd just like to thank the panel for their candid remarks this afternoon. I think that they'll probably be available if you can haul them down. This is kind of a future readiness discussion, and after you get done with the CEO lunch, we'll have a panel this afternoon kind of focused on the current readiness piece of the discussion, and I invite you back to that panel as well. So thanks for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Admiral Moore and your panel. If you come back next year, we'll even bring you water. Okay, again, the CEO luncheon in about 10 minutes to my left, and the awards luncheon to my right, and I have a pair of reading glasses if you're missing them.